I was going to visit one of the shacks, so I took a small tin of 1 or 2, 3 sandwiches. But word got out. Mama is here and she's got a tin. And so let's go and see what food, because people are hungry. So they came and they came and they came. And I'd opened the lid and I just handed out sandwiches after sandwich after sandwich after sandwich. There were queues of people and I just handed it out. And when the last one had their sandwich, it was empty.
Welcome, everybody. This is Simon Gilbo with Inspired. Inspired is all about meeting fantastic people doing all sorts of different stuff across the globe. And it's to encourage us, because I don't know about you, but if I'd spend too much time on a 24/7 news cycle, I'm just letting someone else curate all the bad stuff going on in the world to make me more depressed, cynical, anxious, defeated, pessimistic. And actually, we've got the best news in the world. We've got a wonderful message, and God is doing lots of incredible stuff. And I got no doubt this week that you are going to be deeply challenged and inspired, because we've got in my lexicon, this is high praise, we've got the nutter, we've got the crazy, we've got the maverick, we've got the wonderful Angela Kemm from Cape Town. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you very much, Simon. It's such a privilege to be here.
Oh, it's so wonderful. So, in 1991, I was on my year out in South Africa, and I was serving in a Sotho farm school in the middle of nowhere in what was the Transvaal. And that's where my faith became real in the toughest of circumstances. At that time, you were the other side of the country, and the fact that you're still alive is quite amazing, because you're involved in townships, and people said you're an absolute fruitcake just going in there, risking your life. Lots of naivety and God's protection and grace over your life. I've got you on because, in no small part, because people badgered me to get you on, but that's our mutual friend Nigel Ring, and also Natalie Williams, who's on the podcast a few weeks ago, who's doing fantastic work with Jubilee Plus, who I think she's one of the many people around the world that you're mentoring. And she said that when they did conferences, you were always the most popular speaker, and you got so many stories, and I've already heard a number of them. I love listening to you speak. So enough of intro. Let's go right back, because one of your parents was British, but you moved to South Africa. Is that right?
One of my parents, my dad, was British and was sent over to South Africa during the Second World War with the Royal Air Force as an airplane engineer. He met my mother, a South African, and the rest is history.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because white South Africa under apartheid, there was even a sort of theology established to justify apartheid. And I think you said that, your mother was a lovely woman, but Anne was a churchgoer, and racism was, the default position. Is that right?
That is right. We were a very churched family, but we weren't a Christian family, if that can be explained. Yes, racism was a big thing in our life. We heard about it morning, noon, and night, about white people being in control. But that's because of the brainwashing. It was told us over and over and over again. So we were a Christian family, but certainly didn't know God at all. My dad, being British, he just adapted to what was here, but I can't say that he was a blatant racist. He just went along with the laws of the land. But my mother certainly, it was racism deluxe. And we grew up under that, yes, as did all my contemporaries, really. But I must say, even from small, it bothered me, because I always found myself attracted to people of color and got lots of hidings. And in those days, they gave hidings to kids. So got hidings for speaking to the maids and so on when I walked home from school. And I just couldn't really understand what it was all about. It was a crippling thing to the country. And we lived under fear all the time. There was always if if you speak to people, they will get you. And also the whole thing of if you become friends with people of color, with black people, you'll become a communist. And that was hung heavily over our heads, whether one was in school or it was in the newspapers. The newspapers were guarded, you know. We could only read what the old government put in it, and so on. I remember I was small when Nelson Mandela and the Rivonia trial. And I mean, that, my mother spoke about it 10 to the dozen. Well, serves them right. They must go. And I never understood this all and never asked questions. Otherwise, you get a hiding, you know. It wasn't to be questioned in South Africa.
So you must have had both a conversion to Jesus, to the authentic Jesus, and a conversion out of agreement with the system and apartheid. So what did that look like?
Well, I was 50 years old in July as a Christian, so it's my year of Jubilee. And I became a Christian in my early 20s. Somebody, a pastor, was on the train going past our house, and God spoke to him and said, "Get off and go and speak to Angela." So knock on the door, and he came in, and in I mean, I wouldn't give the gospel like this, but it just shows any style that you do, and God's in it works, because he called me a sinner and gave it to me in no uncertain terms. It's like, whoa. And I thought to myself, well, I am a Christian. I haven't done anything wrong. I haven't been to prison or whatever. And never realized that that wasn't what it was all about. And suddenly, God gave me a picture in my mind of my attitude. I think God just showed me my life, really. And I burst out crying. So the pastor said, "On your knees, ask for forgiveness." And it was all, whoa, very rough when I think about it. And I asked Jesus for forgiveness for my sin. And then he said goodbye and he walked out. And it was like, what happened? But I knew it wasn't dramatic. There was no wobbling and shaking, nothing. But I knew something had happened. And I thought, now what do I do? And so I had a Bible. I mean, every household in South Africa had a Bible. Doesn't mean we read it, but we had a Bible. So I started reading the Gospels to see what Jesus did. How did he teach his disciples? What do I do? And I think that was the beginning of my journey, was as I read that Jesus said, go from town to town, village to village, and find for the man, woman of peace, and so on. I believed it, and so I did it. So whatever I read, I did. I really believed that if you knock on the door, somebody opens, and you tell them about Jesus, or you ask to pray with them, and so on. And so I went to door after door after door, doing what I thought was the most natural thing that Christians did, because that's what Jesus, how he taught his people how to give the gospel. And when you go to a place and they invite you in, do not move around, stay at the place. Well, if I found somebody who became a believer, who I led to the Lord, I went back there once a week, because that's what Jesus said. And so I've always been, for the 50 years, to me, that's what it is. It's a matter of do whatever he says. And what I read in the Bible, I know Christians believe the Bible, but it's like I believe the Bible. I think I've got to do these things. So we were in a church that we had a smattering of what we would call coloured people, what UK people would call mixed race. In our church, no black people. But as a church, our pastor was open to change, but nobody knew how to do it. And so we had these home groups, Wednesday evening meetings, and the leaders of Greg and my group in our house was actually a coloured man, which is most unusual for that time. And he was absolutely excellent. Wow, he challenged us. He said things like, have you considered if Mary was black? And she was carrying Jesus, and it was like, oh, that is a huge statement to make. It throws your brain right out as a white South African. He also, he was very involved in what was called the struggle, which was the fight for people of color against the white government, against apartheid. So he would bring banned videos to our house to show us real videos of what the security police were doing. And it's like, I used to sit there thinking, he didn't even ask permission to use my VCR, to do this. It's like, whoa. and whereas, people have banned books, ugly books in brown paper covers, our banned books were political books written by black men or women in the struggle, but it was in brown paper, because if the security police found us with those books, it was detention without trial. It was a serious time. And even having people of color come and sit like that with us in our home was most unusual for that time. And so this guy who was leading us, Roger, he challenged, I think in our group, I was the most active one, giving the gospel and seeing people saved and so on. And yet he kept his eyes on me and said, but what about the black people? What about apartheid? And I would think, what about it? I can't do anything. And then one day he brought a black couple to our home. The security police had burnt their shack down, corrugated iron shack, because we had and have townships made of corrugated iron, really. And the security police were very active in the townships. And we as white people, we saw smoke from far, but we didn't know what was happening. And the newspapers didn't say. It was all about the danger of against white people, really, more than what they were doing in the townships. And so this couple came in, and quite honestly, it was the first time that I'd had black people sitting on my couch, because normally people of color were the servants, because schooling was, the schooling taught people how to be a gardener or a chef or whatever. And we had a good meeting, and afterwards we had coffee together. And I most probably said to the mama in my most patronizing voice, you are very welcome in my home. And Simon, without challenging me, she said, well, I've been to your home, and in our culture, you must now come to my home. And of course I said, yes, I will come. I was lying. In my mind, I thought, there is no way on earth I'm going into a township. And when I asked her, where do you live? She said, Crossroads. And that was the most dangerous time in the 1980s. The most dangerous place to be was Crossroads. And she was inviting me to Crossroads. And I said yes, just to kind of be nice. And I thought, when she left, I thought, well, that's goodbye. That's the last you see of me. But God had other plans. The next day and the next day, it bothered me so much that I'd lied. It bothered me. You can see the Holy Spirit working. It wouldn't leave me that I lied. I'd lied. My husband, he worked for the railway, and he was away often for a week at a time, and he wasn't home. And I thought to myself, I must go into the township just to get God off my back. What a way to think. But I'm being honest. This is how it really was. I need to get him off my back because he's bugging me because I lied. So I found a white woman friend who'd been in the township once to a clinic or something, or to go and help at a clinic. And I asked her whether she would show me how to get to a township. So the morning before we went into the township, I told our home group where my 3 little girls were at school and what time to fetch each one if I didn't come home. Because I really didn't know, and I didn't know I could die. And who fetches my girls, So a massive chance. So as we drove down this road to the township, do you know the sweat poured off me from nerves. I was terrified out of my wits. And when we got there, somebody came to meet us and they took us through these shacks. And I looked back, where's my car, in case I had to run for my life. And my car, I couldn't see it because of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of shacks and the little passageways that we were walking down. The house the little shack that Timber and Lavinia, the couple who'd invited me, had rebuilt, do you know, it was in spick and span condition. They had put out a little table inside with a tray and the doilies and the cups and the saucers because they'd phoned from a call box to ask, am I coming? And I told them when, so they were all prepared. And so we sat there and every shadow that came over the shack, I thought, the door, I thought, oh, that's someone coming to kill me. Because when the government says you're going to die, you go into a township, you will die. No white person must go. And it was against the law. Only police were allowed in. And I never had permission to go into the township. But more and more people came in to see these crazy white women who would come in like this, not as police or even clinic or anything, but just to visit. It was just not done. But they showed me, the bucket system toilets, where many families had to use one toilet. And the one tap for many mamas to use to get water to wash the clothes and all that. And I was totally overwhelmed by what the old government was doing. It shattered and shocked me, and it was, yes, it wasn't good. And then when we eventually left, I got home safely and I thought, never again.
So you paint, a very clear picture. And I know you confessed yourself, you made loads of mistakes that we learn through our failures, don't we, invariably? And yet God, in his grace, he did keep you alive. I mean, you were told it's dangerous and people had sort of sown the fear into you. That was what the ruling authorities wanted. And yet it actually was dangerous. I remember watching a film of you and the ladies were like, she's completely nuts coming. And yet, God kept you alive and he used you unbelievably. So come on, share on with the journey and the stories of God taking your 5 loaves and 2 fish and multiplying out beautiful fruit.
Well, once I started going regularly, I thought that it's just, here's me doing good, going in, but it was shattering because I went with no team, no big finance. And when you go in among people and you see the poverty and kids not being able to go to school because they didn't have school fees, there's nothing in place like that. Yeah, we pay for everything. And people seeing me and coming and they knowing that I love Jesus and Mama, what can you do for us? And I'm thinking, I can't do anything for you. I don't have the food or the bread or whatever. And I really found the Bible come alive for me, because I had to pray through everything. I had to say, people, when I got into the township, they would bring people out from all over. They would bring their sick out. They would bring the hungry out. They would bring anybody out. Come. The mama's talking about Jesus. And I found God do the most incredible things. He really came through. The Bible, it is true. We know it's true. But when you only have the Bible in your hands and there's no backup, whoa, then you've got to trust that he will come through. Because I used to be scared of death all the time, really. I took a chance every day when I went into the township. But I really saw him do the most wondrous things. I'll tell you one of the stories. So after a number of years, a young man came from the UK to come and work with me in the townships for a while. And we went to a new shack. And I went in and introduced myself to the mama and the tata, the man and the woman, and gave them the gospel, chatted, led them to the Lord, prayed with them. And then I said, do you have any prayer requests? And they said, yes, please, because outside is a car, and there weren't many cars in the township then. And this is the man's car that he was using as a taxi in the township, but it had been in a smash. So will I please ask Jesus to fix it? And so I asked Jesus to fix it. When we walked out of the shack, I looked at the car we'd prayed for, and it was concertina. The front was right in. And I thought, no, I prayed for that. And I'm very ashamed to say, this young man and I, we ran and we went to hide behind a shack to, when Sarah laughed, we laughed because we'd been so stupid to pray for this car to be fixed. I didn't go back there for 2 or 3 days because, it's a bit embarrassing. When I did go back, the car was gone. And so I went in and I said to the mama, where's the car? And she said, well, her husband's driving it. And I said, oh, did you have it fixed? And she said, no, you prayed, and once you'd gone, we went out and it was fixed. And it's like, whoa.
Deconcertinaed.
And for a number of years, I watched it and driving around, and God had left, bits of the concertina still there, which were rusted, so that I could remember that was the car that I laughed at.
Wow.
And so he did the most amazing miracles. And when I was in the township, of course, the security police, they got hold of me. They spied me out and would follow me and so on, and try to trap me in things. And I would be, all I can say is I was scared all the time. And the one day I was driving in my car and I said to God, I am so scared. And he said, just look out the window. And Simon whooped over my car. Was angel upon angel upon angel upon angel. It's difficult to explain what it actually looked like, but I knew. And the peace came, and I knew it was going to be all right. And I was always scared I was going to die, either to be caught by the security police and put into detention without trial, but also that I would die. And we heard of a couple from our church who had gone to somewhere up Africa, and they'd been murdered by rebels. And I mean, they were our friends. And when we heard this, I sat up one evening before God saying, I don't want to go back into the township. I'm too scared. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. And there was nothing for a while. And then he spoke to me. And he said, if I allow you to die there, I will give you the grace to die well. I can't give you the grace now, but if I allow it, you will die well. Well, Simon, if he had said, you're not going to die there, it wouldn't have had the same power as saying, I will give you the grace. So I'd wake up in the morning and I'd say, do I have the grace to die? I don't have the grace to die, which gave me courage to go into places and confront people, security police, or do things I would never have had the courage for. But I knew I didn't have the grace to die well. We serve such an amazing God that has got things in place, and we are looking, in our human way for this and that kind of answer, and it's just not there. I worked alone in the township for 2 years, and then God said, bring it into the church, which I did, which was, it turned things and it made it become a bit different. But anyway, I had a church van, and we call it a bakkie in South Africa. And I was in the church van, and I'd been told at the church office, don't let anything happen to this van. So I drove into the township, and I landed up in a queue of cars, and there were people who were burning each car, coming down the line, and I was in the queue. And I sat there thinking, they're going to burn the car. What am I going to say once I get back to the church office and the car's burnt? But when they came to me and they said, oh, it's you. Okay, just reverse and get out and move on. And I didn't recognize the people at all. And I got away and I drove a bit, and then, you get the shakes come on as you think, God just rescued me from this.
Yeah, I mean, you're the most likely white lady to die in that part of the world. I was the most likely white guy in Burundi, I think it's fair to say, to die, because it was guerrilla warfare. But I just had this, I didn't have this assurance that God would protect me, but I just had that assurance for me to live as Christ, to die as gain. And once we were going on this road, and one time 40 people got killed and we got through, but my colleague leant across with a glint in his eye and said, Simon, isn't it exciting? We are immortal until God calls us home.
That's exactly.
And we had that sort of laughter, that liberated joy, because as someone else once said, safety isn't the absence of danger. It was very dangerous. Safety isn't the absence of danger, it's the presence of God. And you carry this presence around and saw crazy stuff. The other day we were talking and you shared about just taking one sandwich into a shack and word getting around that you had loads of food. Go on, tell us about that.
Well, yes, I didn't know how to do these things. There was no one to explain. So I was going to visit one of the shacks. So I took a small tin of 1 or 2, 3 sandwiches for this couple who was going to visit. But word got out that Mama is here and she's got a tin. And so let's go and see what food, because people are hungry. And so they came, and they came, and they came. And I'd opened the lid and I just handed out sandwiches after sandwich after sandwich after sandwich. There were queues of people, and I just handed it out. And when the last one had their sandwich, it was empty. Now, the thing that struck me was, while this was happening, I didn't even know it was a miracle. I didn't think, oh, look what's happening. I was just handing out. But it's only once it was done that I thought, wow, God did that. God did that. And you want to go on your face and just worship him because he's so all in these situations. It's like being there. He just makes everything come alive, and he makes everything, what he says he will do, He really does do. And so I had to learn how to not be so white. You see, as a white South African, I, I wasn't blatantly racist, but I didn't even realize that I had this entitled kind of feel about me, which was, I didn't know. And so I went into the township to my friends by then, and I said to them, how do I come across to you? And I thought they were going to say, oh, Mama, you're wonderful. You know, you leave your children behind and you come and you're such a good woman. But it was, Mama, you come in like you own the place. And I thought, what? Yes, you come and you slam your car door. And as I said, there weren't many cars around. And you walk in and you say hello to everybody like you own the place. And I got such a surprise because I thought I was just being friendly. But I hadn't really earned the right to do to be friendly like that. My whole being was what I thought was normal. And so I had to say to my friends, will you teach me how to work cross-cultural? Will you teach me how to not come across or be entitled or unconscious bias or all these things? And they said, okay. And so for the 20 years I was in the township, I sat with them every few weeks, and they would say, well, when you did this and when you did that, and we would pray. And I would put my hands on my head and say, Lord, change my thinking, because I didn't know how to change my thinking from what came naturally to me. And slowly, all I can say is, you know, I have this, it's a tin of sardines, an open tin of, it's an unscrewed tin of sardines. I think it's the old style, in which you take a key and you turn the key and, you know, it comes open. I feel God did that to my brain in learning how to respect people, not come across as superior or get the apartheid away and so on. And so I needed lots of help. It doesn't just, you know, one can't just go into another community to say, here I am. And one needs to learn and be humble and be trained.
Yeah. Tell us about some of the marches.
Well, once I was in the townships, you can't just go and preach the gospel and, you know, and waft out. I had to get involved and learn about politics and what is going on and so on. And it horrified me as I learned what the government was doing and what was real and what was biblical and so on. And so God would wake me up in the night and say, tomorrow go march. And I would think, oh, that's so scary. But I would go with 20,000 people, all the black people marching in Adley Street, Cape Town, and a smattering of white people, and me. I would do all the marching. You had to be very fit because you toy, Toyi, Toyi. It's like a war dance thing. So everything moves. You move all the time. And as I would be there, toying with the best of them, some of the men and women would come over to me and say, Mama, what are you doing here? We're not used to Umlungu's white people being here. And I would say, well, God told me I must come. And they would say, God told you? God's not interested in us. Look how you white people live and look how we live. And I would say, you know what? That God that you're talking about, he's not my God. My God sent Jesus to die on the cross for us. That is my God. And they say, Mama, here's my address. Come to my home or my office or whatever, and let's talk. And so I got into various very high up political, you know, people and spoke to them. the one time I went on a march, and I was quite near the front of it, and it was huge, thousands. We're talking thousands. And we marched to St. George's Cathedral. It always ended there, and which is right next to Parliament. And as we got into St. George's Cathedral, I found myself right in the front next to Bishop Tutu. And we were pushed, as people came in, the thousands started coming into, it's a big church, building, but it's like thousands would not fit in, and they squashed us right to the back wall, right. And it's like, we turned around and faced this, and Bishop Tutu took my hand, and he said, "Today we die." And it's like, but this man, and we would have been crushed. But this man, he was a small, short man, and he went on his tiptoes and he said, "People, now stop right there. I'm going to give 10 minutes to this crowd, and then you leave, and then 10 minutes to the next. I'll be here all day, and you come in a few at a time." Wow. And we lived. This man, the command of his voice was astounding. For that day, and in general, he was at all the marches, really. But it was just it was the voice of, "Today we die." But he wasn't scared. It was with a chuckle, because he knew that he was going to overcome whatever was going on.
Hey folks, I love being part of this massive international community of faith gathered around this podcast, and I think most of you know that it comes out under the auspices of Great Lakes Outreach, and we work in Burundi, which is currently tragically still the hungriest country in the world. And yet amidst the grim narrative, there's so much beautiful stuff going on, and we reckon that our 30 ministry partners out there have meaningfully impacted 950,000 people this year, and you can be a part of it. And could you consider giving, £20 or $10 a month, something that's small to us that makes a humongous impact out there as we get prostitutes out of prostitution by teaching them a trade, or microfinance initiatives for widows to be able to start their own business, or orphanages being equipped with what they need, school sponsorship. There's so much beautiful stuff. If you want to consider that, I would love your help. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please do so. Go to greatlakesoutreach.org/inspired. That's greatlakesoutreach.org/inspired. Thanks so much for your consideration. And now let's get back to the podcast.
I just want to get to a whole bunch of those stories of healing that you had in there. It's interesting, isn't it? Sometimes we go to theological training, and I'm not dissing it. I've been a beneficiary of it, but you can be trained into a theology of no longer believing that God does these things, and yet you just had the Bible, you read the Bible, you went in, you lived the Bible. So go on, give some of those nut stories that you were telling me the other day.
Well, I was called into, I didn't just go into shacks looking for people to heal. I was called into different shacks by people, and I went into a shack, and there was a mama, and she'd been lying there for 15 years, unable to get out of bed, unable to walk without, help, or carried by people. And, it's not that I went full of faith. Here I come. It was, she's asked, let me go and see what God will do, because I know I can't do anything. Let me see. So lay hands on the mama, pray. Well, as I left, I had just walked away, and I heard, "Mama, wait." And here came this lady, Joyce, running behind me. And she became part of my team. And that just became a normal occurrence, really, of seeing the blind people seeing, laying hands on them. They could see, they could hear, but then also as they got born again, they did the same, because they seen me do it, so they did it. and the miracles happened, but we took it as normal. It is normal. It wasn't that we expected it, but it was, well, we've got nothing else. All we've got is God. All we've got is God. And so,
So go on, tell me. Did you had a blind person?
yeah.
You know, was this a repeated phenomenon? You had someone, you prayed for them, you saw their eyes suddenly open. Go on, unpack that.
It was a repeated thing, because when once one blind person can see, people bring the rest of their blind people. But what I did was I prayed for some, then I said to the Christians from the community, now you pray. And so they prayed, and they did exactly the same, because I didn't want to be the, she bring it all to the white mama. People
Crucial.
were praying themselves. And when I left, they were still going around to all the shacks praying for everybody because they could. I had another young man working with me, and from the UK, and the two of us went into the Tambo Square where I was working in Guguletu, and we were called to a shack that I hadn't been to before. And the mama said to me, her child was sent home from school and then the clinic because they couldn't help her. She was so full of worms that her stomach was huge and swollen. She was about 6 years old. So we went in, and there she lay with this huge stomach. And she would have died. The worms get into the brain and so on. And she would have died. And so we laid hands on her tummy, asked permission, and said we came against any demonic thing and spirit of infirmity and worms in the name of Jesus. And we said, Lord, bring healing. And we left. And again thinking, whoa, what did we just do? We went back the next day, Simon, and there was shouting and rejoicing and ululating when and people came with clear wine bottles with water in, with all these different shapes of worms in it. It had roundworm and threadworm and whipworm, and you name the worms, all in the bottles. They had come out in the night. And the child was healed and could go back to school the next day. And the people were celebrated by showing us all these bottles of worms. And it's things that just are unreal. But what is the word, gobsmacked? One is gobsmacked when you look at this. Because, we were then got a worm ministry. And so we had to go and pray for people who had worms all over. Quite incredible. Quite incredible.
Yeah. You mentioned Guguletu, and that's the church where you planted Kanisa, that you planted the church there, and I got to preach there, and I think it's about 2002. So it was a wonderful privilege to be there, and I can picture where you were and in action. And
something else that I didn't talk about was, so you were at Kanisa in Tambo village, and now those people, you would have seen the houses there. So those houses, I worked in Tambo Square where there were shacks, 650 shacks, and once I'd been there for a while, the people said, Mama, you say your God can do anything. You ask your God to give us each a brick house. We want a brick house, like you. And I, in my silliness, said, well, God's done so, I've seen him do so much, I will ask him to give you each a brick house. And only when I drove away, I thought, what have you done? You don't mess with the poor. You don't make promises. You don't promise what you can't bring. You don't mess with the name of God, really. And I said, Lord, if I didn't hear you right, please do it anyway. And then the battle began because we had no money. I didn't have, and they didn't have. and they were waiting for their brick houses on a different site. It was just a blank site that the government had given them to put shacks on, and they said, we won't put shacks on. And God spoke to me and said, no fundraising, for which I was glad. I don't know how to fundraise. And it took us, we would lie in the sand on that site and weep. I can remember the tears of the mamas and the tatas, the men and the women, dropping like big African drops on the sand as we wept for finance. And eventually the finance started coming in from just friends visiting, people from the UK, churches who came to visit. They loved what they were seeing, and they started giving finance. And then the one here, I was coming to what was called Stoneleigh Bible Week. Yeah. And I said I as a white person was put on the housing committee to make this happen, these houses. And I said to the committee, we've got 79,000 Rand, which is like nothing. I needed millions, 28 million, 30 million, 40 million, 79,000. And I said to the housing group, go to the office of the housing people, which is a bunch of old South African white people, and tell them you've got this money, what are they going to give? I came back from Stoneleigh, and on the light post, we advertise on light posts, it says, Tambo Square wins 8.1 million Rand.
Wow.
And we could start the first houses. It was ridiculous. So those houses that you saw, they came, it was a hard job to break through, but it was the first housing for people, moving them from shacks into houses in the Western Cape ever done. And the government said, well, if you get this right, we will keep on building. And they just keep on building. And so Kanisa, that building, they gave me a piece of ground and they said, well, you can be our church because you fought for us. And that's where we put the building.
Just wonderful. Oh, I love it. It was Dorothy Day, the founder of the Catholic Workers Movement. It was said of her, she loved the truth enough to live it. And Angela, you've done that in spades. May we all love the truth enough to live it. And it was actually when I was out there back in 1991 that I was first exposed to witchcraft. And, people might have watched The Exorcist. People might have seen this crazy stereotype of a witch doctor with lots of plumes coming out of this thing he's wearing on his head. But witchcraft, and speaking now as we are mostly to a Western audience, it's very, very real. And we're in a sort of post-Christian state right now in the West where there's loads of paganism and sort of coming back in New Age stuff. I want you to talk into it because you become quite an authority and you've taught around the world on this stuff. So can you give us some stories from the nut stuff that went on with you in Guguletu and then relate it to the Western world as well?
Well, when you are in the townships, witchcraft it's in your face, really. That doesn't mean, I don't want to say that it's only in the townships, but it's everywhere. But because I was there, and you would have the witch doctors around, and so at times when I walked in, I got to know all the witch doctors and greeted them. Sometimes they would hiss in my face or whatever. I just greeted back nicely. And I had to laugh one time. A witch doctor came to me and said, Mama, will you pray with me? And I said, why? Because you got power to heal yourself. She wanted healing. And she said, oh, no, my power is not as strong as yours. And so I prayed with her and she was immediately healed. And so I found that we led quite a few witch doctors to the Lord. And the one time I came to my car and there was water and powder around my car. and I knew that I had been cursed because, Mama Angela's too powerful. She's too powerful. And for a split second, that, oh no, comes on one, because it's very real. It is very, very real. Witchcraft and the demonic is very real. And for that split second, it's like, oh no, what's going to happen? And then I say, no, greater is he that's in you that's in the world. No. And I can see in the little windows of the shack, people are peeping to see what's going to happen to her. And so I walked to my car confidently, got in, waved to people, goodbye, got in. And, when I started, that's when it's supposed to explode. And I started it and nothing happened. So I waved again and I drove off. And the next day I went back and people just flocked and they said, Mama, we thought you were going to die. Now tell us, how is it you didn't die? And an opportunity for the gospel is so huge.
Angela, just let me say, because I know some people are thinking that is just nuts, but I want to give a story from us in Burundi, and we had our evangelistic crew, and they were going into a witch doctor's den, and they were dismantling his stuff. And then he came in, and one of our young team members was just about to take off this gourd with stuff in it off the mantelpiece. And the witch doctor screamed, said, don't, if you touch that, you will die. And the young lad carried on in Jesus' name, and he picked it off, and he died. No, he didn't die. because he didn't die, the witch doctor fell on his knees and gave his life to Christ. Now, you listeners, you are thinking, well, either you're thinking, yeah, all right, I maybe my Western worldview has blinded me to stuff. There's so much more going on than meets the eye. And I think these stories are helpful from credible sources to make us think there is more going on than meets the eye, isn't there? So, demons manifesting, was that quite common in your ministry?
Quite common. It's not a ministry you look for. It looks for you, really, because it is the funny side of Christianity, really, is walking into a room and the demons manifest in front of your eyes because of the glory of God living in you. And so at times there would be baboons jumping on the shack roofs in Tambo Square, and they would the community or a friend would phone and say, please come and do something. And we would stand there and sing and then say, in the name of Jesus, we break your hold here. And they would just disappear. But I saw them. They're very real. They are real to the naked eye. And it's all based on fear, really. If you're scared, that's an opening for the enemy. So whoever's listening, we've got to keep our doors closed from fear of all these things. In the UK, when I ministered there for 18 years, and was invited to many churches. And what they did is, when I go to a church, I'm there for a season. I go into all the groups, those Wednesday evening groups, and pray with everybody, and it just modeled how to see God do stuff. Anyway, I was going to pray for this one man, and he had on a T-shirt that had the most terrible face thing on it. And as I was going to pray with him, it's like the face came alive and said to me, you're not going to have power here. And I thought, what am I going to do? Because I am sitting in a very nice house in England with very nice people all watching to see what's happening, And so, Simon, I took my thumbs and I put it in the eyes of this face.
Wow.
And I then prayed for this guy to be freed. He growled, he roared, the anger that came out. And this was anger was quite a common phenomena that I came across in people. the anger towards, and often it's the father. My father wasn't quite what he should be. And I broke the hold, and he screamed, and people's eyes were on stalks to see. You know, when you see it, it's not awful. It's the glory of God and the power of God at work. And he was set free, and this glorious look on his face. And then he said to me, "You don't like my T-shirt, do you?" And I said, "No, it's not good." He said, "I've got lots of them." And he said, "I'm going to fetch them." And he brought them to show me lots. And he said, "I'm going to throw them away and get new ones." And when I saw him on the Sunday at church, because he was a Christian, he had on brand new T-shirts. And I think this is the whole thing of knowing that we have been called to free people of these things that bind them and hold them tight like that. We might not call it witchcraft in the West, but it has the same kind of effect in our thinking when we open doors, our mind, to fear and unforgiveness is a huge thing that binds us so tight and gives the demonic a hold to get in. And yes, I've got so many stories. We could talk all day and night, Simon.
Yeah, I don't want to stop. Listen, but I do want to have a bit more on the West, because you had those 18 years over here and you were massively used across the country and in other nations. And the reason to talk about these years rather than just the unbelievably fruitful times in the struggles and then post-apartheid and the rebuild, over here, because of the fact that it's a blind spot for many of us. And so go on, talk more about stuff you learned in England and manifestations of God's power in England, how he used you. It's really helpful.
Well, if you can think of my shock of going from the townships where everything is so fruitful, really, so it just happens. And then we were invited for 6 months to the UK, and then we were coming home. So 3 months in a church in Maidstone, 3 in Bermondsey in London. But I got so booked that it lasted 18 years. So I had to learn cross-culture in a whole new way. And what worked just easy in Cape Town didn't work easy in the UK. But what was brilliant was the hunger. The hunger for God was so big, and that's why I was invited to so many places. We were invited to another very nice church and into a very nice group with very nice people. And what you see on the top is very nice. And so what I do is, I don't say I'm going to pray for you and you. I say I'm going to pray. Come and all stand here with me, because I have a little bit of gifting and you've all got gifting, and we put it together and we bless one person. And so they nominate themselves and they come and stand in front of me. And so I was praying for this, most probably in her 60s, very, very well-dressed lady, so together. I would have explained her as a yacht club kind of lady, you know.
Yeah.
And so I prayed, and when I pray for people, I get words in my mind, what is happening, and words come in mind, and I just, gently break strongholds in thinking and so on. Well, this woman started coughing and coughing and coughing and coughing and coughing. And my husband and Greg and I just looked at each other, because often the gentler manifestation of the demonic leaving is coughing. And that doesn't mean if somebody's got flu and they cough suddenly in church or something, they got demons, But it was a coughing and coughing, and people ran to get her water. And I thought, the water's not going to help. And so when I'd finished praying with her, she still went in the corner and coughed a bit more. But I didn't give, you've got to maintain people's dignity. You've got to make sure that they're well cared for. And so she went to the corner, coughed, and then she brightened and she said, what happened there? I feel totally different. And I think this happened in so many of the situations. One young man, again in one of these Wednesday evening groups, I asked people who wants to be prayed for, and I prayed for people. And I don't say, I want to pray for you, because that's unfair. That wouldn't be right. But I saw this young man, maybe 20, 21, sitting in the window, on the windowsill, broad windowsill. And he didn't come to be prayed for. And I think, well, that's fine. And then God said to me, go and ask him if you can pray for him. That's very unusual. I just don't do that. So I went to him and I said, may I pray with you? And he said, do you know, I asked God, if there is a God, then you must come ask me to pray. If you can pray for me, and then I will come and be prayed for, and I'll become a Christian. And you just think, this is astounding. So I led him to the Lord. They prayed, broke off things, all the stuff he'd been into, and so on. And so really there's lots happening in the UK. There are this, I found, Simon, that what was happening for me in the township in a different way was happening in the UK and Europe or wherever I went, because, I mean, God is God and the anointing is the anointing, and what job we're given to do is what we do. And so I saw many, many people set free. Another time, Lewis in East Sussex, a very nice county town, very nice indeed. And I'd come from one of the estates, and I was walking, I was new in the UK, walking down the main road, and I said to God, what does a witch look like? Because I'd heard that, witches prey on the downs and so on.
Yeah.
What does a witch look like? And just at that moment, a jag or a Merc or some very nice brand new job car stopped, and this very sleek woman, wonderful hair in a bob, dressed to the nines, very nice, got out. Now I thought, well, a witch would be like a goth, dressed all, I wouldn't know. And came towards me, and God said to me, she's one. And I wouldn't have known. As she came near and we passed, you could feel our spirits. Just didn't, there was something. And then she walked on. And I said, well, bless her, Lord, and free her up. But God just showed me that what's happening is with ordinary people, it's people that we sit next to at a school parents' evening and so on, It's just there, but how marvelous that the church is called to actually bring freedom like this, and we can do this.
Oh, Angela, I want to listen to you for hours and hours more, but we're already over time. Listen, what would be your parting word of encouragement or challenging or equipping? What would you want to say to us?
I would want to say, do whatever he asks. What Mary said to the servants at the wedding, where he turned the water into wine, do whatever he asks. Because I've told you some of the stories, there's so much, and it's a matter of, I got into so much trouble. I've told you the glory bits, but the cost has been extremely high. And the temptation to give up has been there all the time. But I've got to keep on. It is do whatever he asks. Check it out with people if you think he's saying something to you. Check it out if it's radical or whatever. But really do whatever he asks. And then one day when you see him face to face, you know that well done, good and faithful servant will just come rolling your way.
Amen. Listen, I'm just going to, because I think that's really important, and grab an extra minute. You talk about the cost. So what sort of stuff have you faced?
Well, I think you can imagine in apartheid South Africa, white people weren't very pleased with me. Security police were definitely not pleased with me and came to fetch me at home, to take me to police stations. So I'm well versed to being in police stations and fighting for my rights, really, simply because I'm in the township doing good. But they didn't want that. They really didn't want that. Also, I suppose I didn't know I was a woman in ministry. I was just doing what God said, but it was like I seemed to be always in trouble because a woman shouldn't be doing this, whatever this was. But there wasn't a man in the township, and God said, do it. And so I did it. It's been a tricky walk, but I wouldn't change it for anything. Because when you listen to God, that's when you have the stories.
Well, Angela, I love it that you came to the UK for 3 months preaching and you had to keep going 18 years because such was the demand on your time. I've done the maths from earlier. You said you've been saved 50 years, and that was when you're 22, so you're 72. So if this podcast spawns another 18 years of ministry, that wouldn't be bad, would it? You keep going till you're 90, equipping the saints.
I wouldn't mind at all.
Bless you, sister. Listen, folks. It was so good, wasn't it? We cheer you on, Angela, now back in Cape Town, and thank you for what you brought to us. I'll put your details in the chat. Listen, guys, just share this with people. Gossip Pit, give us a great review on Spotify or iTunes. I want to thank Adam Thomas Steer for the editing, Mike Sandeman for the mixing. Next week, another fantastic guest, very different life journey. That's the joy, isn't it? We've all got such different stories. I hope you have been, I think you have been encouraged, stirred, challenged at multiple levels. So go out there, live the truth. What did Angela say? Do exactly what he says. Just do what Jesus says. Get out there. And one by one, we change the world. All right. Have a great week. God bless you. And toodaloo.